I'm feeling foggy, my headspace is wiggly. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Iggy. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Judgement Seesaw. I'm here with another special guest and a good friend of mine, Iggy, from many different sites, but you know him as IDP Iggy. What's up, Iggy? How you doing, man?
Hey, Ronnie. How you doing today? Happy Friday, man. I hope everything's
Thank
going well.
you. Things are going well. Same for you. And just for anyone, before we dive into Iggy and get into this interview, for anyone that has not seen this show, the title, The Judgement Seesaw, comes from it's from economics, and it's been parlayed by therapy. And essentially, it illustrates this paradigm that you'll run into when you're listening to, thinking about, or judging other people. And is that if you are being judgmental, you're actually not being understanding, and you can't do both simultaneously. So the judgment seesaw is kind of a therapeutic way to make sure that you're actually listening, putting yourself in somebody's shoes, and understanding. And if you want to go try it, it's a good exercise sometime today, later this week. Sit down and try to judge somebody and understand them simultaneously. And I'd be willing to bet you'll find that you can't. So that is the point of Judgment Seesaw. And it is about understanding. I want to understand you, Iggy, and let everyone else get to know you a little bit better too. So before we dive into mental health, do you mind giving just a quick 1 minute run through on what you're doing in fantasy football and sports in general?
Yeah, with fantasy football, I've been playing IDP since 2010. So, quite a long time for, the IDP community at least. And, I've created a draft guide that'll be free from the Sports Affiliation, building that up with Ronnie, JC, Evan, Wendy, so many of us, JR, Rico. And it's a good group about positivity and inclusiveness, which is what we try to promote. And if you want to be a part of it, just give us a shout, either Ronnie or me, and we'll try to get you all set up. And and then for Fantasy Alarm, I write bets. I believe my last article of the NBA season will be Monday about predictions. So I've been with them all year. Could be doing some football stuff with them as well. And I've worked with Denver Sports Betting. I've worked with some of the UK guys. I really, really enjoy my friends across the pond. It's kind of when I first started, those guys were there with me a lot more. Just kind of the hours I was at, worked with them better. That's where I'm at. You can find me at IDP_Iggy on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And then I do have Jailhouse Bets over at TikTok, but you can find it under Iggy as well. If you just put in like Iggy's of TikTok, I'll show up.
Nice. With mental health, not that I don't want to talk about basketball because it's the playoffs right now, but we're not going to. With mental health, the point of this show is mostly to dive into people's stories, let them share so that anyone that watches feels less alone, feels like there is a place for them in this industry to find inclusiveness. Can you give me a quick run through on your experience, not just with mental health, but the events in your life that have happened over your adulthood that has helped lead you to where you are now, what you've overcome, and so forth?
So just like a generalization of it, is what you're saying?
Yeah. And then we'll get to the nitty-gritty when we do the questions.
Yeah, it's just I think everybody, your experiences shape your whole life perspective, and the more experiences you can have, I think that increases to more awareness. And you said judgment versus understanding. I think understanding really comes with really putting yourself in that person's shoes and really having empathy for them, or at least sympathy. If you can't be empathetic toward them, maybe you could be sympathetic to others, not necessarily in the same situation as what you're in. But yeah, dude, my whole life is just fun. Like that's a whole biography, man. But I've had a bunch of unique experiences that have shaped me to kind of have the views and the perceptions that I do in life. So we'll dive into that.
Well, let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of this. You have, I think, a pretty remarkable career so far in the fantasy sports space. You've built it through a couple different avenues, and as you mentioned, different platforms. Can you share how you first got involved in this field and what inspired you to focus on sports and betting in particular?
Yeah, man. I think one part, and it all tied into mental health. Like in college, I didn't know what fantasy football was. 2010, I moved down to San Marcos, Texas, and go to school at Texas State, a large university, about 35,000 people. And my neighbor was like all about the Eagles, and I was all about the Packers, and I still am to an extent. And he was like, "Yeah, you got to play fantasy football." I was like, "Man, I don't want to do that. I just want to cheer on my Packers. We're good right now. We got a chance. We win the Super Bowl next year." And he's like, "No, just do it, just do it." And he did it, and I became instantly hooked. And that was my only year to play without IDPs. And I was like, "Mark, you suck as a commissioner. I'm gonna take over, and I'm gonna improve this." And I think it was like such an escape for me. And those like times when you're supposed to be studying, and you'll study or you'll be reading or you'll be writing, but then I would just go to look at my fantasy football to give a break, and I became a commissioner, and I loved it. And I've been a commissioner ever since 2011 or 2010, excuse me. And I just that kind of carries over to wanting to share this experience and this format I created. I got into it, convinced myself to go to the expo after seeing Bob Lung and how fun it looked. The first year I didn't go in Canton when I became aware of it, and then I was like, man, I got to get there no matter what. End up driving there. And once you got there, just being yourself, I would say most of us are good people. I'd say 99% of the people I've met there, or 99.5, are really great people. And you just kind of be yourself, and you get to talk to all these people
Yes.
that you can network with. And it's just such an endorphin rush and a euphoric feeling, and you get around all these people. And that pretty much led me to working for all kinds of places. And it ultimately led, JC and I and Evan to like starting the sports affiliation, kind of taking out the negatives that we learned and trying to focus on what we wanted to be, which was positive and inclusive. So
Yeah. Well, I love that. And Evan and I 2 days ago spoke like at length about a lot of the vision and like I would say like the motto, I guess, behind the Sports Affili, like being inclusive and allowing people to be themselves and creating a community that is about happiness and welcoming. And so I think you guys have done a really good job. And if don't take this as lack of enthusiasm. I just spent 15 minutes brown nosing you guys when Evan was on. For anyone that's watching, when you're done, go back and watch the episode with Evan as well. And just from a philosophical standpoint, what Iggy and JC and Evan are doing with the Sports Affili is really cool. And it's a really, really great addition to the fantasy community in general. For you, one of the things that we breezed over a little bit, and I want you to introduce it and however you are comfortable, but part of your backstory has to do with a bit of a run-in with the law, of course. And then you've actually done like my first exposure to your content was the jailhouse bets and all of that, which are still like some of my favorite bits of content that anyone's ever done in the industry. What did you learn during that period, and how has like your life changed, and what have you done to change your life in general? It seems like you have a really, really happy kind of in touch and grounded way of living now. And I'm curious how much that impacted your trajectory now versus the way your life was going before that.
Man, I mean, we could spend 3 hours just talking about the impact of that on my life. And yeah, being young, I guess, by the time I was 20, I've been arrested 12 times. Never anything violent. Don't let you, when people ask me what you get arrested for, I like to jokingly say aggravated sexual assault to a domesticated farm animal. And then like they like you get like this like look in their eyes, like what? And then they like some of them put it together and what you're saying, and then hopefully they realize it's a joke.
Sure, sure.
And obviously none of those things are joking. But it's like, I have to put a spin on it, because all I've ever been arrested for is being drunk in public, DWIs, which is not good. Don't drink and drive. And like I said, I wasn't even 21, so I wasn't even supposed to be drinking, right? And then, of course, marijuana possessions, and that's the extent of my arrest record, running from the cops, that, of course. Being a kid, being somebody in a rural area that is more had some intelligence, and there not being anything to do but get in trouble. That was what led me there. And man, I like during those nights, I can kind of think back to there, and I just didn't understand it, because I did a lot of what was asked of me. I was a church leader. I was a who's who academic. I was an all recognized athlete, played every sport our high school offered, but the first time I got arrested was between my junior and senior year, Friday the 13th on June in the summer. And it kind of, like I completed probation successfully, did all those things, was still being everything. But I kind of got a glimpse of what a community will do. Will shun you, will like how quick how superficial a lot of relationships are. But that really ate away at my mental health for years, because, I felt like when you're in a rural town where a lot of people have, I won't say given up hope, but aren't pursuing their goals, they begin to live vicariously through you. And you have a lot of pressure to be this all-time athlete, to be this wonderful Christian kid, to be this super smart academic person. Like, all this pressure comes from the teachers, from the administrators, from the community, from family, and that will wear you down. And I think some of the people that have rampant greed is because they had so much pressure as a kid. Maybe I think it's like a disease of the mind kind of thing, but that's another topic. With me, I was bad. I went through a lot of depression in jail. I didn't understand it. I would end up going to get 3 degrees from 3 universities, but the smartest people I ever met came from prison. The most intelligent, the most creative, like the most like the stuff that they could make, man. Like the stuff tattoos were made out of, the ink, and the way that they could smuggle stuff in. And and once you get there, like, I went to jail, went out of jail, went back to jail, went out of jail, and then this is where I kind of had an issue for a long time with mental health, because I went to like a rehab / jail, and you're forced to do counseling there, but I was really honest with my counselor, and like at 19, 20, I'm like, I'm not going to quit partying. So I don't understand the concept of this, of me, and if you want, I've never been really good with lying. I'm just like, here's the truth, take it or leave it, like, and that, I'm still kind of brash or abrasive to some people due to that, and, but jail, like, ultimately, man, I learned so much from there, and it like allowed me to be comfortable with, as somebody that has been like the center of attention or the highlight of attention, like, it made me really comfortable with being away from it all and realizing that society has a lot of flawed issues. All right.
Yeah.
Like, we have personal issues and brain, development issues, but a lot of what I think is wrong is our society and what our society does to our people. And I think that is the biggest kind of influence of mental health and what's wrong with it. And there is like some undeniable statistics about jail. Like 99% of all males in jail do not have their biological father around. That's undeniable. Like, that leads to mental health issues. Like you said, what has shaped you? Like not having a mother. I've never had a mother. I like, those things will, if you don't become aware of it and you allow it to eat you up, it'll eat up your whole life. You'll see people that'll just go down the wrong tube, not having their biological parents around, not having good mentors around. If you don't snap out of that, and that's what prison allowed me to do. Like, when Chad Ochocinco went to jail, I think his name was still Chad Ochocinco. He said it was the best time of his life, or it was like the biggest blessing in his life, because it allowed him to focus on just himself. And, it allows you to do that. You create an inventory of yourself. You think about all these wrongdoings you've done, but then, like, for me, it became like I was getting in a cycle. I was in the Texas system, and one of the best advices I ever got given to me was get out of the system and stay out. And I got out, I got my degree, I moved out of the state, and I pretty much have stayed out of that state. You gotta be aware of what can cause you to have these mental collapses or these triggers that society will not accept. Okay. Yeah. And that's what I ultimately, like, it's a part of the reason I made a lot of my decisions. I was like, I got to get out of this cycle, because I watch these guys just cycle in. It's like you get to where you see people come, you're back in here, and that guy, I became that guy. You know what I mean? Like, they were like, oh, look who's back, and if you don't figure out a way with mental health to be aware of what's causing issues and to change your environment, change your way of thinking, read some like books. Like, I read The 4 Agreements while I was there. That was really beneficial. I read George Orwell, which I didn't really grasp at that point, but now that I'm an adult, I kind of grasp. And like, he kind of observes society in a way that makes you feel like it's not all your fault. Like, hey, it's not all you. Like, you got things you can correct, but there's this big issue with society, and it's going to keep prolonging and keep expanding. But jail also shaped my betting. That's like, I didn't realize I was betting with my grandmother. We used to pick spreads and games. I was doing that since I was 6 or 7 years old. not realizing, I just thought it was fun. Like, we had these old
Yeah.
railroad books that my grandfather worked for the railroad, so they would mark the times that, the trains came in and whatnot. And so it was perfect for writing out the game schedule out of the paper. And then me and my grandmother would check like whichever one she wanted. And I think she was going with her coworkers and, betting on the ones she felt good about too. But in jail, like I said, the smartest people were there. And there's like a big mix in jail between people that enjoy sports and people that don't enjoy sports. All right. And that, like, you get a television and there's only one usually, and that becomes a big deal. But betting, when people got money on the line, like money being soup. So there was real money. I've seen people with real cash in jail.
Sure.
And
Commodities on the line.
Yeah, all kinds of contraband. And
Yeah.
but that's where I refined my betting, and I got really good at it. I was like the only non-black person allowed to play basketball for like 6 or 7 months, which is there's betting on basketball games, on the court. And it just kind of threw me into that culture without me realizing it. I got my first degree was an education of a felon. I went from 18 to 21. I learned all these things about this lifestyle, about con artists, about everything. And part of that was betting, because betting was predominantly illegal. We're talking 2006, 2005, 2007. So I got a real education in that without realizing how much that was going to prepare me in the future. And it's also the first place.
Yeah.
It's also the first place I ever saw people playing fantasy sports. I'm pretty sure it was fantasy baseball. It's like you get your little clicks in jail, and you're not too many people jump around in there. But these old heads would get the USA Today, and they would go and they were marking it. They were circling. They were doing the stats, and I had no clue what they were doing. And I'm pretty sure they were playing fantasy baseball now that I know they're doing it. But that kind of sums up my jail experience, and it influences me today. Like, I try to be empathetic. I grew up in rural Texas. So when you get thrown in jail, you get thrown in for people from rural downtowns, everything. So you got like this whole cultural experience, and it made me realize how society views all kinds of things, like how you look, color of your skin, how well you respond to adversity, or like somebody being in your face even. And like I still apply all these methods kind of to my life like that. I have more. I've applied more that I learned from prison than I learned from my 3 degrees. So I hope that kind of sums it up.
That was awesome. Yes, you summed up a lot. Let me try to think of what to tie into. First of all, just I brought this up with Derek Brown yesterday, but one of my favorite phrases is people don't change until the pain gets bad enough. Doesn't mean that you like have to be experiencing awful pain or whatever, but until your situation at hand is so bad that you have to change, it's typically when people change. It's not usually like everything's going great, I guess I'm going to change this about my life. It's not usually how it works. And for you, it's a lot to go through, and there's a lot of learning that goes there. But you alluded to like your foundation, right? You did not have the same foundation as many other people in life have. Actually, similar to me, I was born into foster care. I bounced around foster homes until I was 4, and I was adopted, and I hit the jackpot. I got really lucky. But for other people, they don't have that. People with missing parents, not having that true stable household it is an indisputable, as you said, it's an indisputable fact that the stability that a child is given in the first 10 years of their life are indicative of how the next 15 of their years of their life are going to go. And so for you, we got Disco in here.
Let's have Disco.
For you, I think that you did a really good job illustrating like your story, like what you went through, why you went through it, and why you changed, and then the benefits of that. And you alluded to a little bit about how society does unwittingly in many ways just kind of section off people and say, yeah, we're done. And there, of course, there's certain labels that I would be okay with. We don't have to talk about them on here. But there's certain crimes that are so bad that, yeah, let's section those people off. But for the most part, you have a lot of people that run into consequences that made like an honest mistake, or didn't know better, or weren't exposed to the proper, I wouldn't even say proper, but the more like stereotypical way of living that everyone accepts. And they get caught up in a system and a society that kind of chews them up and leaves them there. And so I can only share just one thing from my end. I have been arrested 3 times. Once I was leaving a bar. I was on like a week after my 21st birthday. I was sitting in the car, and I went to a bar to watch football at 1 in the afternoon and knew I was going to drive home. So I was like, let me pace myself. I had 6 beers or 6 drinks over the course of 10 hours, but I think I had 4 of them in the last like few hours. And I thought to myself, I'm good to go. I can drive. I didn't feel drunk or anything. Got in my car and honked at my friend across the parking lot, like exorbitantly, like 16 times. Like, I start my car, and right behind me in the parking lot, an undercover cop just turns his lights on and walks over and hits me with a disorderly use of the horn, which is a thing in Virginia. and then in Virginia, an example of people not knowing better. For me, I didn't know the law in Virginia. And in Virginia, if you blow into the breathalyzer on the side of the road, it's not admissible in court. It doesn't matter. It's about what you do at the jailhouse. And when you go to jail, what they test you in there. So I did the one at the side of the road. I was pissed. I was like, I'm not drunk. I wasn't drink driving. Like, what are you doing? I was really upset. And I refused the breathalyzer at the jailhouse because I was mad. And they told me that was okay because they're crooks. And I got slapped with a permanent DUI. And that's the law in Virginia. If you refuse the breathalyzer in the jailhouse, they will not tell you. They encourage you to do that. And it is a permanent conviction. And so I had to deal with that. And I'm not trying to take away from your story or even compare the two, but just as an example, like that is another example of the way society can, in many ways, like trick you into facing consequences and in many ways ruining part of your life. I lost a job because of that. The only other 2 times were completely inconsequential things. I just was like, didn't know I was trespassing on a property in an abandoned town and had the SWAT team called on me one time in my 20s. And that was exciting. But
maybe they're hiding something in that ghost town. You're not supposed to be here.
It was actually a industrial chemical drum that we thought was abandoned, and it wasn't. And they like called the National Guard on us or something. It was crazy. We got off. We were doing charity work in the town, and they were like, "Oh, we know you. Get out of here." But anyway,
don't come back.
Away from me. I'm sorry. I just went on a ramble about myself.
No, that was good. I love
it. About you. There were a lot of lessons taken from like your time in quote unquote the system. I have one fun question about that, and then I want to move back into like more fantasy football general stuff and some really cool causes that you're working on right now, some of which have affected you personally. But when I was in recovery, I met a lot of people who had been in the system, and I heard on multiple occasions about jailhouse Dorito burritos.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever have one?
We didn't have Doritos, but we did have like a chip, and you like save the soup package and you break it down, put the hot water, and then you put like your chips. Like the real thing would be to like get a jalapeno. Like if you could get like, because nothing has flavor in gel. Like salt and pepper in gel is like if you go 6 or 7 months eating bland food, by the time you get back to the free and like you eat something, there's like so much flavor that they put in there. You can taste the difference. But yeah, I had many of burritos. We can make pizzas. Like there was one particular chip bag. I can't remember which one it was, but it was larger than the rest. So you could get like 4 or 5 soups in there and you could like set it. Some guys would get like a garbage bag and like make a big spread. I was like, I'm not eating out of a garbage bag, man.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, creativity, man. Like, I've had an amazing meal. Like one of the chefs like smuggled back a bunch of ingredients and we had like a proper like soup, like, and he shared it with like 7 or 8 of us. And, that, I was just like, you could have ate this at a restaurant. You would have paid to eat this. Yeah. And this guy making it with like wires going into the electric outlet to heat up what we're cooking with, it's pretty amazing actually.
It is. It's really cool. And when people are like back against the wall, nothing else to do. First of all, to allude to like your upbringing, you talked about being in a small town with like a lot of idle time. One of my favorite phrases is idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially for adolescents, if you give them free time, it's the reason it's not like the 70s anymore, because people talk about the 70s like they were the world's greatest time. Sit down and talk with your parents. Like a lot of their friends died, every single one of them, because there were no restrictions and kids were just kind of sent out the door and told to go figure out whatever they wanted to do. And typically boys would get into trouble or do things that would get them into trouble if they got caught and they were dangerous. And so it's a segue, or a side note. I don't love how helicoptery things are today. I think people are way too plugged into everyone else's lives, but giving people structure and purpose and having things to do in their day-to-day basis and having a community be a part of is really important. And for people like yourself that grew up in a smaller town without as much connection to everything else that was going on, I understand exactly what you're saying and how that in many ways kind of set you up between your home life that sets you up to go down a path that is not what society wants. You face the consequences of it. And now you are, not only are you doing like FF7s, you're doing the Sports Affiliation, which is a beacon of positivity and inclusiveness in the fantasy space, but you also are the director of the Kawasaki Charity League. And Kawasaki disease is complicated. It's not something a lot of people know about. And I know it has affected your daughter. Can you give me a little run through on just Kawasaki disease, what you have going on there, why you're doing it, and then we can tie that back into mental health?
Absolutely. Yeah. Kawasaki's disease, it is an autoimmune deficiency disease. It's not deficiency, it's an autoimmune response to a virus. Most of the time it happens to children under 4 years of age. So pretty delicate toddlers that can't communicate as well. You know what I mean? To be like, hey, something's not right. There's been a huge spike since COVID. Okay. So there's a direct correlation with that. And I work in a ski resort town, one of the first places that COVID was found. I'm pretty sure that's what happened here. And, like due to that, we had to, like, I say that because there's like a huge rise, but it affects the heart. It makes the coronary artery dilate, which then will, your heart vessels have pressure. That's how come your heart's able to pump blood. And once your arteries start to dilate, you no longer have that pressure. Same concept of 100 gallons of water going through a tiny hose, then going through a bigger hose, right? It's going to just spill out as opposed to shooting out. And that's how it affects it. Most people don't know what it is. I didn't know what it was. My daughter had it. It is pretty preventable, like the latter stages of it, as long as you catch it. So that is why we created Fantasy Football Sevens, to just spread awareness. We just last week sent from all the donations, do all the work. I made the flyer. We sent one. We got the address for every rural hospital in Colorado, every medical center. So even like an emergency care center.
Amazing.
And we sent it off. So yeah, that my goal is to do that to rural hospitals, not because like how I brought, simply because of the fact because there's just more resources in an urban area. You have more doctors, you have more people, you see more cases of this, so it's a lot likely to get more diagnosed. Whereas maybe a couple you got 2 or 3 pediatricians maybe in a rural area, they may only see like a case every 3 or 4 years, so it doesn't pop into their mind. So that's where we went with it, with the awareness, and that's what it does. And unfortunately, it affects almost exclusively children, and the long-term effects can be devastating if you don't catch it. And they really don't know. It's such like relatively newly discovered. They don't really have a whole like a data like a whole data break with a bunch of people to say, yeah, this are the effects of 50 or 60 years from now. Like we're just now finding out that data. So that's what it is.
Well, and I'd love that you're pushing through and trying to help raise awareness to that, especially like I don't know if that's the right thing to call them, but I call diseases like that. They're like niche diseases. Like it's such a new and small subset, but it's such a serious thing as well. It's not everyone knows about it, and it requires people like you forcing the issue and making people aware. And it's super important, similar to selfishly like the Judgement Seesaw. The whole point is to force the issue on mental health and make sure people remember once a year to like keep an eye on that. With the industry, how has your experience been in like the reception around supporting that? Have you had any good success stories so far that you can bring up, or just in general, what's your vibe?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoke to a couple of people that have gone through it. Josh Allen, little brother, had it, and he spoke openly. He's like, I was real little, but he's like, I clearly remember like my parents being like, I could see their stress, I could see their worry, I could see their concern. So that's just one example. But as far as the fantasy football community, several people have told me they didn't know what it is. I think up until last year, over 50% of people told me they hadn't heard of it, hadn't heard of what it does, how it affects people. So and then just joining the league, we all love the Scott Fish Bowl. Scott Fish
Yes,
is a huge
shout out to
inspiration
Scott
to me.
Fish.
And then the Warrior Bowl guys too. That's when I did it, because when you look at Scott, like I'll use an I statement. I looked at the Scott Fish Bowl. I was like, man, he's like, look how great it is. Like, I would love to have a charity league that big, and maybe it'll get that big, but it just seems like such a daunting task. Like when you look at how great the Scott Fish Bowl is, and to get something like to that level, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself anyway. It's just a natural habit for me, kind of as a competitor, I guess.
Sure.
But then the Warrior Bowl started up, and I was invited to that first year, and it's going into its fifth year, I believe, as well, fifth year. And like I was just like, man, like, you know, they're doing it, they're starting it up, they're making awareness. I can do this too. And you know, every year when you get the packet, I you know, break down my experience, because my daughter had to fly from here in a jet. You know, they're like this. They told us this is pretty serious. We're gonna fly her in a jet. She had to go to Denver, and this is the middle of the winter, so I had to like drive, you know, because only Christina was allowed to ride with my daughter, so I had to drive, you know, over the night, like over 2 mountain passes, and to get to Denver in the middle of winter. And it was just, you know, I mean, you talk about mental health. Like I don't think I played any song. I was just in my head for 6 hours of driving, you know. But I break that down a little more thoroughly, and then I just break down IDP. I figured this was a good chance to show people IDP, this format I created. So I think the responsiveness to both is great. You know, TD, good. He's part of, you know, the sports affiliation, really does his own thing more, but that's totally cool. My point is, like, he called me because his son got really sick, and he told me, like, you know, he mentioned it to his doctor. Could it be this? And the doctor was like, yeah, we probably need to consider that for being an option. They ended up ruling it out, saying, no, it's not that. But like, just like him having the awareness to talk to his pediatrician, and his pediatrician, you know, having that realization, like, hey, you're right. It could be, like, you know, bringing it to the awareness of the doctor.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of this. You know, I hope nobody gets it. But that, like, for me, like, I'm not an MD. Like, I got an MA. Like, you know, I have I had a degree, but I'm not an MD. But about spreading awareness, I can do that. I can help with that. That was kind of initially what made me make this push. Like, I can tell people what it is and tell my story. And if that helps one person in this whole escapade, or one family, it's worth it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that you nailed it. Like, and I was curious. I'm glad you shared those stories, because that's, I think, for anyone else that's watching, this is a good example. Like, the community, if you have a good cause, you make a good message, the community will, in many ways, rally around you. And when you talked about comparing yourself, I think it's okay to have aspirations and then compare yourself to where you are on track for those aspirations. So looking at Scott Fishbowl and having aspirations to one day have a tournament that's as big as that is totally okay. The danger is when you look at it and you're like, well, it's not as big yet, so now I'm not doing it right, blah, 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 blah. And
Right.
I think I'm not worried about you doing that. For people that are watching, if we use Iggy as an example, the methodology that at least my therapist would lay out would be like, cool. So you want to be like Scott Fishbowl. Ignore what he's doing right now. Go look at what he did in year one and try to match that. And then try, and if you want to accelerate things and use them as template, maybe if it's taken him 11 years to get here, shoot for 7, shoot for 6, see if you can do it quicker. But overnight change and overnight accomplishment, if you set yourself up with that sort of goal, then you fall into the comparison, like insidious comparisons that are not helpful and are not attainable either. And so that's a really good point, and I hope that lesson can be used for other people that are building hopefully big things that are still starting small. It's something that I have to look at with even just this channel. I think I have almost 50 subscribers now. I'm not looking at my subscriber right now and comparing to other channels at all. Like, yeah, I'm not going to even allow myself to look at that.
And also, like, I just want to piggyback before we go on. Like, you know, I did, like, you know, like, there's certain expressions I've learned through therapy or counseling, and you know, instant gratification is a big need, like a big problem of mine, you know, and that's why, like, building stuff with my hands is like really rewarding. You know, when I was a carpenter, I'd like complain about working in 100 and something degree heat, but the cool part of it is, like, in an 8-hour day, like, you could put up, like, you know, you could see the difference. Like, you could put up 7 or 8 walls and have a structure, and you're like, yeah, we did that today, you know. And that instant gratification need, like, find healthy ways to get that outlet out so it doesn't bring you down.
Yes. So I love that. There's a great book. I talked about it with Nick Whalen on the first episode. It's called Relentless by Tim Grover. And he basically identifies a couple different strategies that helped him turn Michael Jordan into, like, the monster he was, or Tiger Woods, or Kobe Bryant. He was their mental fitness coach. And what you just said, like, if you have something that you need to satisfy that is not a positive influence on your life, Tim Grover's advice is to go ahead and figure out where you can find that release valve, that exhaust pipe, and build it into your life. So for Michael Jordan, it was actually gambling. Tim Grover would tell Michael, like, you need to go gamble this weekend. Stop worrying about it. You need to go take the day off on Saturday and go hit the casino, because you gotta exercise that demon. I don't know that it is advice I would give everyone about every demon they have. Like, if you're a meth addict, you should probably not just like lean into it all the time and so forth. Or even for me, I know that I have an insatiable desire to take naps. And that is that is a direct result of my depression. That is not something I try to exercise or satiate like at all. But
Great
in
awareness
general,
too. Yeah. I had somebody bring me that up into jail. They were like, "Man, you sleep a lot. Are you depressed?" There's actually what they call my celly.
oh
And
wow.
I was like, well, fuck yeah, I'm depressed. We're in prison, dude. I didn't mean to drop that expletive there,
No,
but
you're good.
that was, I was like, yeah, dude, have you looked around?
Hey,
But that's a good
that's
observation.
obvious.
I don't think a lot of people are aware, and I do it. I know when I'm having a bad day, and Christina's well aware of it. Sometimes I'll go lay down at 4:00 at night because I know for me, I really do believe in the next day concept. I believe the difference in the one sunrise to the next can be, you can have your best night, you can have your worst night of your life followed by the best day of your life. It really can't be that drastic. But be aware of your triggers or flaws or whatever you want to call them.
Well, and you identified that earlier when you were telling your story. Like, you were able to recognize, and it's part of growing up, it's part of maturing as an adult, but knowing like, when I was 17, I thought I was good at everything. I am good at a lot of things, but I have faults and I have weaknesses, and I have to embrace them so that I can be a whole person and really present who I am to the world genuinely. And so I think you have nailed that, dude. You're like the most genuine, authentic personality in the entire fantasy football space, and I don't know too many people that would disagree with that. Like you, we have a guy with dreads who is unrelenting about just talking about whatever is important to him, who does jailhouse bets thing and post betting lines from the top of mountains, and like you're just an absolute true image. Like, just you exude who you are, and I love that about you. And I hope that other people, if you're not following Iggy, it's IDP_Iggy for him. You've inspired me over the last 2 years to get out of the anxiety paralysis mode that I've been in and doing content and be comfortable being myself. I'm an absolute goofball. I would prefer to joke rather than sit and listen to a sermon. I would rather that's me. And I always worry, will people accept that? Yes, they will. Not everyone, but there's
Right.
enough people that will. And you are one of the people that has given me the confidence to come out and do this show and to launch the AI stuff next month. So I appreciate that about you. And I think anyone else that is trying to work their way up in the music, or in not the music industry, the fantasy football industry.
Party.
It's Ronnie and Iggy. You guys follow Iggy. He's a great and shining example of that. Let's do one or two quick questions real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. I want to speak about one thing. And before I do you have anything to add to all of that?
No, I just want to say thank you, man. And I hope I can always be authentic. And, if I lied and said I wasn't worried about people not liking me for being a goofball and who I am, I would be doing you a disfavor and not being honest. So.
Sure. Well, we can always worry about our faults, but not letting them define us.
Yeah, don't let them control us. Yeah.
Yes. And that is what I have struggled with. And you've given me a bit of a North Star with that. So I appreciate you for it. But speaking of that, like people not accepting you, like the internet is pretty toxic sometimes. And for the fantasy football industry, we live on, for the most part, X, also known as Twitter. It's like the most toxic possible of social media apps to be on. And it's a double-edged sword because we find a lot of clout. You can accelerate your brand and so forth by using social media, but also it comes with a lot of toxicity. So how do you handle negative comments or online harassment? And what advice would you give to other people that are facing similar things?
Well, first off, I'm not so disciplined that I react the same way every time. I really applaud those people that do. Sometimes I give in, dude. I mean, I am still flawed, and sometimes it depends. Like, if I haven't maybe exuded any physical activity, haven't worked out, haven't biked, haven't done something, like, no, I notice I'm ready, I'm geared up if somebody attacks me. But for the most part, it's another thing, I learned just throughout my experience with people is I try to kill them with kindness. I try to respond back with something positive. And then sometimes if that doesn't work, I become a little bit of a facetious, and I kind of see if they can pick up on these tones, if they're able to, because then it becomes like a wit joking kind of thing. And I like that, honestly. Like I've got told I was a great debater. I got told by like the master communicator, in my opinion, one of the master communicators of the world. He said, "You are a master communicator. You're just lazy." And so I'll never forget him telling me that. But I really enjoy that kind of like witty rhetoric like debate. Like if I'm like, especially if I've had like a Dr. Pepper or some form of stimulant, a tea or something, like I'm like zoned in on being able to get witty. But for the most part, I do try to kill people with kindness. And dude, I would be like, people say, obviously say stuff, although I am Mexican American, I get classified racially as white a lot. And they're like, oh, white guy with dreads, white Rasta pasta and all this shit. And I used to let it bother me, but it doesn't, you got like I said, that book I read, The Four Agreements, man. The second agreement in life is not taking things personal. And it's like, I used to have no issue with that. Like when I was younger, like I was very in your face about who I was. And if you didn't like it, go kick rocks. There's plenty of them to go find. But as I kind of got older and tried to be accepted more professionally, it started wearing on me more, But then I kind of bring that focus. I reread that book probably, I don't know, man, 8 years ago now. And I was like, man, I got to really hone on this, because what my philosophy professor was like, because when I read that book, I said another thing was the hardest agreement, and I wrote a whole paper on it. And she's like, I found that very interesting, yada, yada, yada. And then I got older, like her truths hit me really hard about how like taking things personal could be a big drag and a big letdown on your mental health. And, it's weird for me, the trolling. I try not to support it. I try to keep my feed positive. I try to mute people if they get really negative, and then I usually go back and I unmute them, because I realize we all have bad days, and social media is an outlet for that for some people. But I meant it in the comments down there in our sheet. But we're part of the guinea pig generation. So all these things are going to have to we're going to have the ebb and the flow, and we're going to have to figure out how to navigate. When I think about the essentials of like the 1500s, you had to have like a navigator. You had to have somebody that understood like cooking or food. You had to have, essentially somebody that knew the way of piracy, and like that's all kind of converted to digital. Like we have to have a navigator through the social media. And if you can't do it yourself, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And I think as a whole, us as a collective energy are like using us as a guinea pig, and social media, and people being body shamed, but also the good of it, like making people aware of like positive concepts. Like if I go on my Instagram, it's way different than my sports feed. It's a lot of uplifting stuff. It's a lot of like therapeutic messages, and it's also like some politics, and that so it mixes in there. But I try to keep my feed relatively like uplifting and promising and awareness on my Instagram. And if you don't have set those parameters, I think you're going to be in a little bit of an issue, or you're going to put yourself more at risk to experience some bad mental health. Because the online toxicity, I don't think it's going to become less rampant. So you're going to have to learn to be aware of it, set your parameters, and try to get your feed, because you have the option on what you see. Like obviously, the technology knows what you're looking at, knows what you're talking about, and incorporates that into your feed. But you could choose to ignore it. You could choose to say, hey, I don't want stuff like this, or I want more posts like this. Like that's how I got so much positive therapeutic stuff. I was like, I like this post. More posts like this for me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can train the algorithm a little bit and do that, but it requires a attentive hand, if you will, for a few weeks. But I like that. So you try to kill it with kindness, or if you're feeling up to it, you try to joke around with them. But typically you try to stay away from like, okay, well, you're being a jerk, I'm going to be a jerk. Like, let's go. Like, stay away from that. Yeah. Which I think is really healthy. Some people have said they just ignore all of it. Some people engage with all of it. Josh Larkey, I had on last week. Every day he posts something where he's just kind of like doing the latter of what you mentioned, where he just is engagingly joking with the people in a very public way.
Larky and I have had our battle or time or two, but we're friends. I would love to hang out with Larky too.
Yeah, Larky's the man. And actually he's a good example of something that's different than you. Just as a side note, a lot of people misconstrue what they see from people online for who that person actually is. Right. So for you, I feel like you kind of are just you all the time. Iggy is Iggy. For me, I try to just be me. Ronnie is Ronnie. Other people have different demands in their career, different strategies. And like Josh Larkey, when I talk to him in person, or we get on the phone and then I go watch like a video of his content the next day, it is like two different characters. And,
right.
and that's not just him. There's a lot of people in the industry that are like that. There's a lot of people with Like they know that a certain persona and way to talk and way to type does better online. So they embrace that. And I think it's a smart strategy. But if you are in the fantasy community and you have decided that you have a bone to pick with someone in the industry because of the way they present themselves online, I think that you're not going to meet everyone, or you might, but put it in your back pocket that there's a very good chance that's not actually how they are. And it gives you a little bit more understanding, and name of the show, less judgment.
There you go.
For you, let's do one last thing.
Okay, man. And I'm enjoying the show. Thanks, Ronnie, for having me again.
For sure. I want to keep going, but I actually have to go to school.
I know.
So last thing here, real quick. Physical activities and hobbies are part of the core, right? You got to get your sleep. You got to have a good diet. You got to do therapy. If you have stuff to work on, you got to have the right people in your life to support you. But part of like mental hygiene is physical hygiene. And part of therapy can also be physical activities. Dave Kluge got on and spoke at length about, for him now, his cycle is a few times a month. He leaves everything and he goes and hikes through mountains. And because it is like the most therapeutic possible thing that he has found in his life, it helps him ground, it helps him reset. For you, are there any physical activities or hobbies that you engage in that help maintain your mental health?
Yeah, and this is something I realized when I was in prison. Like I made a list of things that brought me joy, because happiness can change, but joy, in my opinion, never really does. If something makes you joyful, it's probably going to make you joyful your entire life. What's up, Spin? And one of those things was being outside. Like I said, I grew up in rural. I grew up in a town with no stop. Like I didn't grow up in the town. I grew up outside the town that didn't have a stoplight, where there's more cows than people. But I was always like playing basketball. Like as a kid, I remember on caliche, dribbling, playing with nobody but myself, man. And I would have to be called in, like once you could see the stars, like I would have to do that. So, and Jill, I realized that I started playing basketball a lot too, playing hacky sack, but I realized I had to stay moving, because that's part of the ADHD thing. Like I've never been clinically diagnosed, but I've been diagnosed by basically every teacher I've ever had in my youth. And activity is just part of it, man. And I realized how much I love moving. I love being outside, but I grew up in the flatland. You know, now that I live in the mountains, I call it the flatland, the Midwest, you know? So if you weren't on like a water, yeah, the frozen tundra. Yeah. If you're not on water, at least in Texas, the recreation is pretty limited. I trespassed a lot, Ronnie. I've had guns pulled on me multiple times because I was just following some creek, and I was like, let's just see where this goes. And you find a fossil, and you find some like deer antlers or something that you do in the country, right? And so I get that. And I realized that I had to have hobbies. And then when I moved to New Mexico, and I was just surrounded by public land, like everywhere you spit is public land, 46% of the state or something like that. So that allowed me to fall in love with mountain biking, fall in love with skiing, fall in love. At that point, I got back into cross country and was running with the best cross country worlds, in the country from a collegiate standpoint, and just getting back. I joined the soccer team, so a sport I didn't play as a youth at all. I joined the club soccer team, and that's kind of carried over. Like, and I noticed it, like, some days when I'm writing, for the past 6-7 months, I've gotten up and I've written about 1,500 words every morning. I had to get out and do that, because I caught myself treating this like prison. I was like, I'm writing too much. I'm withdrawing. I'm staying in this one room, because once my wife got a full-time job, I had to kind of shift my role to do things around the house, pick up the kids, all, the household chores, in addition to some of my work. And what I started doing is, in this exact room you're seeing, I started putting myself back in this 10 by 10. I started reading, I started writing, I would get locked into social media. And my brother's death really kind of reawoken that for me. I was like, man, my brother dying at 23, I got to get back to doing the things I love, because I'm not healthy, and I bought a new mountain bike. Somebody stole my mountain bike, so I had to buy a new one. But it is imperative. And especially, like, I believe so much in like collective energy. And that just simply, like, there's a study. They did the crossword puzzle. They did crossword puzzle. The next week, they gave the people the crossword puzzle from the day later, and their scores all drastically improved, just because that energy, that thought is already out there, the fifth dimension, quantum physics kind of thing. And just to wrap it up, it's like I feel like part of the problem in academia is like we try to cubbyhole, and like, this cubbyhole is too big, let's make it smaller, let's compartmentalize until we just get to the core of something, right? And I feel like health got separated: physical, spiritual, mental, like, no, it's all complex. Like, what we do is it's one of the societal problems of the United States, probably around the world, but at least, I'm so much experienced in this. It's like we try to take a complex issue, a very dynamic issue, and we want it to be simplified. We want it to be this or that, or hey, this is what you do. And most issues in life are very complex, like a spider web. All right. You might take out one thread and now you've had an entire reaction on everything around it. And I think health includes being spiritually right, being mentally right, being physically as good as you can be. I'm not asking you to be able to go run, a marathon or do like Kluge and just go up and over every saddle pass, until you're getting 3 or 4 14ers knocked out. Of course, if you could do it, do it.
Sure.
But I just think like health is so encompassing. Like there's a, if you ask an anthropologist that studied all kinds of stuff, if you ask like a certain section of Inuits, Eskimos of Canada, they're like, "Are you healthy?" And they're like, "I saw 3 caribou, I saw 2 sea turtles come up, and I saw the whale come up to breathe. I am very healthy." So health is like a societal concept, and it's very complex. But to talk about mental health, I don't think it's fair to separate mental health from spiritual health and from physical health. And by spiritual health, I mean like when I go outside, I talk to my ancestors or whatever, and some would probably call that mad or crazy, right? But it's therapeutic for me, and it's a part of health. And I think part of being spiritually happy is crying every day. Like you should be laughing and crying every day for good health, I think, and that might seem extreme to some people, but it's like these basis of emotions that you have to stay in tune to for the core of your health, for the core of your soul.
Yesterday, I was talking to Derek Brown yesterday, and he was like, "Oh, like I get in the car and I scream. I throw on heavy metal movement and I let my emotions out. Like it's important. Boxers, like people, you don't have to box, but a lot of people back in the day would go to the gym and hit the punching bag for like an hour and just let it out. And just like I can't treat people like this, but I gotta get it out."
Right.
um, but I think that's really apt, and I know that it was in February when you lost your brother. I am really, really sorry about that. And I don't want to dive too deeply into it. But for you, how have you been doing since then? Has it been lingering with you? Is it affecting your
Yeah,
mental?
I mean, I think about him every day, like I put posters up. So I got some of his clothes that were given to me. I had to go down there and figure out what happened, with both of my dad and my stepmother being like, Mexicans, not having like a full grasp of everything, what was going on. And honestly, there's good days and bad days, Ronnie. And like, I'm not going to be so naive to tell people, oh yeah, it's all good. My dad tries to do that. I think he's a little like from that generation, right? But there's good days, bad days. I think the biggest effect on me is, like I said, I just think about mortality a lot, like in an in-depth, like philosophically, and all the people that have came and gone, and how like am I on this life, and like everything it took to get here, and now me being the only brother, like we had different mothers, but like 5 of my brothers from my mother are in foster care, Ronnie. They bounced around and they've had horrific experiences. I think one of them eventually got adopted, but like I have this burden of like, because I felt like my brother was going to be that guy for that side of my family. Like, here you go, you're the shining boy. You can go do it. You'll get everything, right? Like, whereas me, kind of viewed as like a screw up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like just because of my everything in the past. So now I feel like a little bit of a burden to have to step it up more. But I don't necessarily look at it as a bad thing. Like get outside more, take care of your body more. Something my brother was really all about. Really into physical health. And I'm like, okay, what can I learn from Ernie? But I think about mortality a lot, especially with my kids, and like how, like I've always, I don't like to not get too deep into it. I don't really like believe the religions and stuff that I was upbringing with. I kind of combined all the religions I've studied, but I still do pray. And I still do pray in like your stereotypical fashion of most Christians, right? And I always, for many years now, just prayed for long life and that to have my family together, And I think I think Ernie kind of brought that in for
me. This will be fun. Real quick.
And I see you have the Timothy Leary quote up there too. If you want me to dive into that, I can. I just whatever you want.
Yeah, I was planning on just closing out the episode with that. Let me pull this thing up. Hold on.
And are you? How does the month end at the end of the calendar month, or How does that for their mental health awareness?
Yeah, the 30th, 31st, I think, is the last one. We'll have Bob Harris on for the final show, which is
Oh,
really
what going out with the bang, baby.
got him, Kelly Singh, Jake Trowbridge, a few other people too. I'm trying to like selfishly for the sake of marketing. I was like, well, you guys are all have big followings. Let's do you all at the end of the month.
And Debra, I got to go back and check that episode. I didn't get to check it.
No, it was
Yes.
amazing. D-Bro's
Yeah.
the man, dude. We got emotional. He and I both teared up during it. It was a good time. All right, I've got something for you. You're talking about I have this one question, Timothy Leary thing, and then we're out of here.
All right, let's go.
So you talked about how you've combined a lot of different faiths and everything. I don't have a problem saying it. I'm not anti-religious or anything. I'm kind of not religious either. I'm more of a spiritual person. I kind of vibe with whoever, as long as your religious beliefs don't involve you like being bad to other people or judging other people because they're not in your religion. I'm good with you.
Exactly.
Do you know Baha'i faith?
I don't. What's up with that?
All right, Iggy, this is my homework for you and for anyone that's watching is to go read up on this. I was exposed to this very early on in my latest bout of therapeutic journey about 7 years ago. Somebody in recovery, actually in an AA meeting, told me about this. So this is a guy, it's not actually that old. I think it's only 100, 200 years old. But there's this dude who, I'm going to butcher it. This is Ronnie's version. Basically, it was like, there's a lot of religions. They all make good points. They all kind of also say the same thing. I wonder if there's a way just to tie all of these together under the same umbrella so that we can approach each other's beliefs while also aligning our goals. And he built this guideline that incorporates every major religion in the world, threads all of their messages together. And then if you go to a Baha'i temple, it's literally an open circular temple with open walls and arches, and each arch represents a religion. And as you walk through the temple, in the middle of the temple is the holy book of that religion. And then you can go like walk around in a circle and see the lessons from each religion. So Baha'i faith, I think, is really, really cool for you. It might be something fun to dive into and just read about. I'm not a Jesuit like preacher for Baha'i. I just find it really fascinating. And then with that, like the understanding and empathy of someone like you who is able to go through a lot, be raised with a certain set of beliefs, have a different experience than everyone, see a lot of stuff through their family life, their second family life, like everything you've been through. A lot of the times what that does is it creates a person that is very closed off and judgmental, and I wouldn't even fault him for it. You're the opposite, man. You're very, very open. You're very, very eager to help other people. And you are also very eager to go out and put forth like the messages that you believe are necessary to make society better that are lacked, whether it's the Kawasaki Foundation or like the efforts you're doing in the Sports Affili and mental health, or not just mental health, but Sports Affili for the community. And you had mentioned Timothy Leary, right? The tune in, turn on, tune in, drop out, I think that's his phrase. Basically, to embrace cultural changes through the use of psychedelics by detaching them from existent conditions and hierarchies in society. You had mentioned in the show notes that it applies to our generation. Why don't you go ahead and just give a quick rundown on your thoughts on that? And then, unfortunately, we do have to close the show up because I'm going to be late for work.
No, yeah, well, I'll wrap it up. Yeah, if you don't know who Timothy Leary is, he was a professor, had access to all kinds of experimental, like psychoactive properties that got shut down and are just now coming back, actually, especially like if you live somewhere really progressive like Colorado. Like my friend is giving out ketamine for therapy. Mushrooms are being given out for mental health.
Can I butt in? My mom has been I don't even know if I should say that. Well, whatever. She's tried a few of those. She has a lot of mental health issues that she's worked through, and the ketamine stuff seemed to work really well.
Yeah, and see, that's what, like when I wasn't really aware of this, Ronnie, I'm gonna try to wrap it up. Like I've done every drug you can think of. I don't mean like, oh yeah, I was at a party and I tried it once. I mean, like I did it. I got involved into it. I went to the depths of it. And I do think that without being aware of it, I didn't have this mind yet, it was all like late teenagers, early tweens, whatever you want to call that area of life, late adolescence. And I do think it helped immensely with some depression. I used to have some major depression as a kid without realizing it. And like I said, I think that ties into not having the biological mother. But those without even realizing it, those like taking ketamine, doing LSD, abusing mushrooms, like all those things brought about some kind of neurological change in my brain. And I do think without ever intending to help, it did help. But I'm not advocating people to go out there and do what I did, because I was also very reckless. I was a poly user, like not sleeping. Luckily, I never harmed anybody. Luckily, I've never been in any altercations or anything like that, or stolen from people or anything like that. But I do think that there is some truth to it. And to tie it back to Timothy Leary, I think like his concept, and he just had such a platform. Once you get that big, I think you kind of become naive to the real issues of the masses. But like the rat race, I think is part of it. Like just what they've done with housing and how much the cost of living has gone up in the past decade. Like I said, us being the guinea pig generation, I think you got to turn out to it. What did Dave say? He's every once in a while, cut once a month. He tunes out and drops out and, turns off. And, as a surfer, we turned that terminology around. We said tune out, drop in, because that's what it's called when you're dropping into the wave. It kind of turned Timothy Leary's around. But that expression is so true to me. And if you ever feel like it's wound up, or you feel like something you've read on social media is really getting into you, man, just apply the Timothy Leary law, apply the Dave Kluge law. Get out there, turn off your social media. Don't try not to bring your phone unless it's for an emergency. If you're getting way out there like Dave is, but you don't have to get way out there. You can just go down to the park, sit by the river, meditate. All those things have truth to them. All these things that shamans and leaders have said, religious leaders, like they all talk about meditation, going out in nature, being part of that ecosystem. And I think that that's kind of forgotten in this, like, go, 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 go. I mean, how many of us have 2 jobs and take on some other additionally? Like, take a break, tune out, drop out. It's okay for a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. Forgive yourself that like you're a human being. You got to give yourself a break. There isn't a single species on the planet that goes 24/7.
Nope.
Except for humans. And it's not all of us either. Like most people don't. And the ones that do struggle internally. Like it's just impossible. You got to get your rest. Make sure if you're overwhelmed, as Iggy said, find a way. I love the term grounding, and just get yourself out of the concrete wall, the technological like cycle that you're in. Step away from all of it, even if it's just for 2 hours. And
I just real quick, I just want to say fantasy sports can be that outlet for some people that have really strenuous jobs, like an attorney or a high-end administrator. Turn that off and just go focus on your fantasy. Do a best ball draft. Relax for a little bit,
Yes, absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. I think I haven't brought this up on the show yet, but I think I'm going to just do this once a week during the year, throughout each year. And then during the month of May, I'll turn the whole channel over to mental health. So at some point over the next 12 months, I want to get you back on and dive more into some of this stuff. But for me, it is noon. It's afternoon and I got to be at work. So I need to go do that. Iggy, anything else that you want to plug or people that you want to shout out before we hop off?
No, I just want to say thank you, Ronnie, for building this platform, not being scared to, you've been on this branch for a few years now, and it's not, it's risk. And I just want to applaud you for doing it and say thank you for having me on here, almost like a therapy session right here. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for coming on. Thanks again to all my other guests. Tune in tomorrow. We've got Chris Allen from MB Fantasy Life coming on, and that should be really interesting. And a few more shows to close out the month. In the meantime, IDP_Iggy or at the Sports Affili on all of the socials. Just go find them, follow them. They're doing lots of really cool stuff. And in general, I'm Ronnie. This has been the Judgment Seesaw, and I'll catch you tomorrow.
What's going on between my ears? Everyone seems to be so clear, but I'm feeling foggy. My headspace is wiggly. Let's talk about it with Ronnie and Iggy. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness